Thanks for joining us on today's live Sword Talks broadcast, the show that talks all things blades. I'm your host, Arun Kester, creator, and director of MiddleEarthNews.com. And with me, I have my special guest, David Delagardelle. Hi, David.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. I am very excited to have you here because back in the day, I sound like I'm 50 years old, but back in the day, like you and Andy, when you first started Mad Dwarf Workshop, were like one of my first Q&As ever for Middle Earth News. So
That's right. I remember that.
yeah, so I was like, oh, good times. So exciting to see where you guys have gone since then and everything. It's awesome. Definitely. Lots of things have happened.
Wow.
In case you guys don't know who David Delagardelle is, he's like a master bladesmith maker person. That's the official title.
The official technical title.
Yes. It's on his resume and everything. Yeah. No, I mean, this stuff that you have made is just fantastic. Really, I just all inspiring. I mean, I like dabble in like some sketches and things like that, but the quality of craftsmanship in your blades and swords are just astounding, really amazing. So I'm definitely excited to have you here and talk about that because
Thank you.
I stare at them and I go, how? How does that happen? And I actually recently watched a show, The Secret of the Viking Blade. I don't know if you've heard that. It's on Netflix, so I watched everything on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And just the amount of work that goes into creating one blade are just like, what the heck? I don't know how you guys do it. And there's so many elements that could go wrong, and if they go wrong, you have to start all over. I'm just, oh my gosh, what a process.
Yeah.
So,
I know the documentary you're speaking of. Ironically, the gentleman in it, featured in it, Rick Furr, he's a good friend of mine. He actually, I think Rick was the very first professional bladesmith, blacksmith I ever met. I met him back when
oh, really? Wow.
in high school. He lives up where my grandparents have a cabin on the lake in Door County, Wisconsin, where I recently just got married as well. So I even invited Rick to my wedding. He couldn't make it. So, but yeah, Rick is an amazing. I mean, literally, sometimes you see those documentaries and you question: is the person talking? Are they just blowing smoke? Are they really? Do they know what they're talking about? Rick, not just tooting his horn, not trying to boost his ego if he was ever to hear. Without exaggeration, I would say is one of the most talented living bladesmiths, blacksmiths alive on planet Earth today. And I mean, because he not only understands the sword practically, but he understands it metallurgically and scientifically. He knows what's going on with the steels. Anyway,
right.
I have a big man crush on Rick. He's got a beautiful beard as well. He looks like a dwarf.
One of those guys with the beard thing going on. That's awesome.
Anybody who is interested in sword making and doesn't know what we're talking about, yeah, go on Netflix. I think it may be on YouTube as well, and search like Nova Secret of the Sword. And they'll learn a lot. So
that is really cool. Watching that process, and there were, like I said, there were so many elements to making the sword. So let's back up though a little bit and talk about how you first came to decide, yes, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make swords.
That's a great question. In short, not intentionally, honestly. It's still really funny and silly looking back on how I found myself here. And it was kind of just very organic, a little bit providential, just kind of meant to, I guess, be that way process where now I really can't imagine myself doing anything else. It spoils you. Like, I'm now probably incapable of ever having like a real job. Well, I mean, I would lose my mind if I sat in a cubicle or had to do anything like that, because it's so rewarding in the sense that you go into the shop and you craft something with your hands and you get to hold it. And I still do. I do graphic design and illustration. That's what I grew up dreaming about doing. I went to school for it. I studied illustration and design at Ball State University. I still love that, but it's even funny with that, even though that was my first love. It's not as rewarding as sword making, because even if I sit in front of the computer for hours designing a website or a graphic or an illustration, it's I still get a little bit stir crazy because I'm not holding the piece that I'm making. So that doesn't really answer your question, but yeah, I got into the craft very, very organically, and I mean, I grew up in a very blessed family. I mean, I love my family to death, and they certainly are an artistic family in every sense of the word, and encourage creativity and self-expression. And my parents did not limit me and my siblings at all. And we were homeschooled for a little while. I was homeschooled early in high school, and I think that and anybody who knows a homeschool kid, they're both weird and a little bit eccentric, but have I don't know, it helps me creatively find myself a lot easier and a lot sooner in life than I think sometimes public school or different educational systems can let kids. So I mean I grew up on a steady, healthy diet of Tolkien and Lewis and G.K. Chesterton and John Bunyan and all the classics, nice. Iliad and Odyssey, Beowulf.
So cool.
And I assume that's what all other kids did too. I mean, it's like, what, you don't run around in the woods half naked, shooting rabbits with your bow and arrow that you crafted? So that was my childhood. And I met my lifelong brother and close friend Andy Davis, who, if people are familiar with my first business, Nightdorf Workshop, they'll know Andy. Andy was my business partner, and first getting into the craft. So kind of by accident, we're two. I've known Andy since I was 6. It started with, woodworking and making fake guns and bow and arrows, and it evolved into metalworking. And I think we realized how we could do it. We didn't have anything holding us back when we went to a Renaissance festival and saw. I mean, not a very elaborate Renaissance festival. In some ways a little bit cheesy, but it really gave us the freedom to realize, wow, we could do that. All these tools are very primitive and simple, and so we got our hands on the things and learned the craft ourselves. So
that is crazy. When you say learned the craft yourself, are you saying you actually who did you study, or how did you learn that craft?
Yeah, I shouldn't oversimplify it, because it was a long process, over the course of really 10 years, honestly. We started when, I think we were 13 or 14 when we first picked up a hammer and started forging. And at first it was just a lot of trial and error, like kids would do on the weekend. Andy's parents have a beautiful farm in Newcastle, Indiana, and we ransacked one of his dad's barns and claimed it as our own and set up our tools. And so it was trial and error and kind of self-teaching at first. But later in high school, leading into college, then we started to get a little bit more serious and started meeting other blacksmith bladesmiths. Then, obviously, so learning from them. And then the internet, it's unbelievable. You've got the wealth of knowledge all online at your fingertips. You just need to get the patience and the willpower to search it up. Nobody's stopping you, to learn anything you want. So with resources like that, an incredible forum that I'm still active on, was probably the biggest help in learning the craft, called Bladesmiths Forum. And it was started by a world-renowned, amazing bladesmith named Don Fogg, who's one of the father figures of the modern bladesmithing world. He was at the first Arctic Fire, if anybody's familiar with the Arctic Fire shows or event that Dave Stevens put on. So we got on Bladesmiths Forum, and by the time we finally hit college, Andy and I, we started to get commissions. We put our work out there, as open for people to commission their custom pieces, and realized, wow, we can really do this as a business. And we weren't intending on ever doing it that way. And then winter of 2009, I got a call from Marvel Studios to work on and that was an incredible blessing and helped me get my foot into the realm of self-employment and full-time craftsmanship. So
now, when he says he got a call,
yeah.
This is a big deal because I love this movie. So yeah, you want to go into that a little bit about Thor, the excitement about that?
Yeah, it definitely was a surreal process. It was middle of a nice icy cold winter in 2009, and I was obviously, like I said, still in college, and I think I was checking my email at 2 a.m. one night, seeing correspondence with customers, and one email was not from a customer. I think it literally was titled work for a movie or something along those lines, and it was an email directly from the props master, a really kind guy, the props master who worked on Iron Man and
oh wow,
Pirates of the Caribbean. I think I could be wrong with that, but I know Iron Man for sure. His name's Russell Bobbitt, and he was working on Thor, and he was the one who personally emailed us and said, hey, would you guys like to come on board? We want to give you a break, for and some exposure and help you along in your craft. And they certainly did. It was awesome. Neither Andy or I traveled out to California or New Mexico where they shot the film, but we Skyped extensively with the props team, and then the director Kenneth Branagh. He saw our work and approved it and said what he liked and didn't like and gave
Kenneth Branagh. Huh.
Yeah, he's awesome. A big Kenneth Branagh geek, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Realized he was seeing our work, and so yeah, it was a really fast-paced, pretty stressful. It was stressful in the sense that we were learning how to make traditional historical swords, and they were asking for a really quickly made 4 exact copies of a big honkin' sci-fi movie prop.
Yeah. This sword is not if you guys have ever seen Thor. I mean, it's the key sword, and it's just massive. I think I've told people before, in the show, I've just started, training with the long sword myself, the German long sword, and I am this thing is massive. My arms hurt afterwards, and I can't even imagine trying to pick up this sword. I mean, How did they, what was their thought process? Did you have any creative freedom with it, or did they kind of have well, we want this? How did that process go?
It was cool. They did give us a pretty considerable amount of creative freedom. I was doing a lot more of the designing. Andy was worrying a lot about the practicals of materials and getting the tools to make it. So the design aspects were in my hands, but they had a designer on their team design the sword, and then we took that design and tweaked it, to help it just be a little bit more believable, a little bit more functional and realistic and easy to make. So yeah, definitely certain elements like all the knotwork you see on it, all the carvings and whatnot. They didn't ask for that. That was something I wanted to add. The fuller, the groove down the center of the blade. That's a feature you see on historical swords. They didn't have that. I thought it would be nice. So it was a lot of fun. They did give some freedom, but they wanted 4 exact copies of it, 2 of which were real steel and bronze, which were about 10 to 15 pounds a piece, and then 2 prop swords that were both aluminum. And I think they may have also made a rubber mold copy based off of one of the hero swords that we made. So yeah, a considerable amount of work, and it all had to be as closely exact as possible. And I should also add that, so this was the first Thor movie that came out a couple years ago, and Thor 2 is coming out. I haven't seen much of it, but me nor Andy have done any work for Thor 2. I'm pretty sure all of the work done on the second one is done by a good friend of mine named Tony Swatton, and he is in California. He works on a lot of movies, and his company is called The Sword and the Stone. Tony's worked for almost every film you can think of made there. So I think he's made the updated version of the Heimdall sword. It looks great. I've seen some photos of it. He did my design justice, and he kind of even improved it and tweaked it in some ways. So it's really cool to see somebody else take a design that you had control over and give it new life. So
that's awesome. Oh my gosh. I mean, to be a part of a major motion picture and see your work, what was it like the first time where you saw the movie and you're like, I made that?
It was creepy. It was more surreal and creepy than anything else. Because what was hard about the project is we worked on it in winter of 2009 for only about a month. We only had a month to make 4 huge swords. And, we had to sign legal waivers that said, Marvel has the right to your head if you let news out about this. Because, they're very strict about their secrecy and whatnot, which makes sense for movies of those caliber and
right.
So we weren't allowed to talk about it with anybody, really, other than our immediate family for about a year and a half until it came out. So.
I mean, a year and a half, that's just insane. I would, my head would explode.
So, yeah, it was interesting. But it was a good project. It taught us a lot and taught us a good work ethic, and how to be more professional, and I'm still learning that, still working on it. So.
Definitely, I think, I mean, to do a sword for a major motion picture, that's, that's something, definitely.
Yeah.
And I mean, you guys, Mad Dwarf Workshop, it was so cool. And I mean, I told, Dave and I were talking a little bit before we went live, and I mean, one of the things I love, they had this dwarf in this, I don't know what shape you would call that. It was just a cool shape, but it looked like, like a shield, and it looked like something a dwarf would carry, and it's got this dwarf's face with this beard. It's just awesome. I need to have it like on my as my door knocker. It's like bam, bam, bam. It'd be awesome.
That'd be a great thing to craft. I need to consider that. So yeah, Andy and I we were really blessed with how Mad Dwarf Workshop kind of took on a life of its own. I mean, people need to realize it was really surreal when we were, and humbling and kind of frightening when we're high school students and then going into college and we're getting emails from people. A lot of people assumed we were like a company with a team of people. Like, we're just two dumb kids in a barn learning how to do this, and so. We were learning the craft for ourselves, and but I think it was I'm glad me and Andy gave it a name instead of just making it all of our own. We didn't want it to be about us. We wanted it to be about the work, and let the work speak for itself. And like the Mad Dwarf almost became a kind of like entity of its own. It became a monster and just grew and grew and grew. And people still give us such kind words, encouraging words about how we inspired them to get into the craft or into art or
That's awesome.
all those kind of things. And so it was cool. And we didn't end it on any kind of a negative note. We were kids when we started. The foundation of Mad Dwarf Workshop was built by two high school students, So by the time we were, older, and Andy had gotten married, and life was changing, and we knew we needed to just do different work. That was the natural result of it. But Andy's awesome. Andy and I still do a lot of work today. Andy's an incredibly talented blacksmith, bladesmith, and is teaching the craft as much as he can to people. He's taking kind of a hiatus at the moment, but anybody who wants to learn the craft should get plugged into his work online. So.
Awesome. And I mean, you guys aren't just swordsmiths and bladesmiths. I mean, you guys are also. I mean, I know they're bladesmiths and swordsmiths, however you want to say that, are artists, but you also are actually artists. Like, you sketch and you draw, and that was one of the things I remember first when I came to look at your site and Mad Dwarf Workshop back then. I just was like, holy crap! Like, not only do they do the swords, but there's like some seriously amazing sketches that you guys have.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I that was, like I said, has always been my love growing up. I grew up in a very artistic family, and so that just kind of flows out of me. I mean, it's what I grew up doing. It's what I love. It's what I feel like I was made to do. So I just love sharing that joy with people and I wanted to make it not about me. I want to join into other people's joys. That's why I love taking commissions, working on other people's projects. If they have a vision for something, I love bringing it to life. Because I got plenty of ideas of my own, but I love working collaboratively with people on creative projects. And Andy's really talented in art. I mean, he finished a metalsmithing degree at Ball State University, and so he's a skilled jewelry craftsman. He's worked for different jewelers and done really refined work. A lot of it he hasn't even shared online. I hope he does at some point. So yeah, I really appreciate the kind of words about our art too. Yeah.
I mean it, definitely. So I'm jealous. I wish I could do some of those characters. Like, you do all these characters, and I just love it. They're very unique, and I just like that type of thing. But yeah, I mean, so you guys, Andy and you had Mad Dwarf Workshop, and then you guys decided to, like you said, go different ways, and it's as a good parting. So let's talk about what you did then, what you've started now, and what your current occupation is.
Yeah. So currently, if anybody's familiar with my work, the smithy name my work under is Cedar Lore Forge, and it's just me as an individual artist, but I liked having that external name as opposed to just my own, David Della Gardell Forge. Nobody's going to know how to type that into Google. So Cedar Lore is better, and I put a lot of thought into it. I had a lot of ideas cooking in my mind for years, even during when we were working on Mad Dwarf, and it's really the exploration of me wanting to dive deeper into I love using the word mythopoetic, kind of Northern European styles of swordsmanship and sword crafting. But what's weird to me is I'm making swords, but I'm really not even that enthralled with swords themselves. I mean, they're cool. I like swords. They're neat. But some people are way way more interested in swords than I am, even though I make them. For me, they're almost what I'm more concerned about and more interested in is the message that I'm sending through swords. You know, they're a vehicle, they're a symbol, they're a medium, an art form for me to say bigger statements and bigger ideas, and so that's what kicks in my mind the most is those bigger ideas. Especially, I was talking to Daniel McNichol today, you know, director and producer of you know, the upcoming second Reclaiming the Blade, and
Yep.
we were geeking out talking about all these different things, and I was telling Daniel how you know, I can only speak for myself as an artist, and to some people's ears this may sound politically incorrect, but I just really have a heart for inspiring young men, like just young boys and stuff, because I was, you know, one of those kids who dreamed crazy things, and thankfully in my life I had older men who didn't say that's stupid, shut up and go do, you know, work here or there. They said no, like go for that, you know, like dream big, like fight hard, and like, you know, love the people that you love, and you know, how does that relate to swords? I think it does, because I mean the sword's a powerful object that it speaks to women too, of course. You know, there needs to. I've got a lot of bladesmith friends who you know, they have daughters, and there does need to be more. I'm part of the group of guys that wants to see more women blacksmiths. And
Yes, yes.
there needs to be. And so I couldn't agree more with that. But I guess, you know, I have to be just honest and heartfelt with where my strengths lie. You know, I know how to resonate with young men better than, you know, young women. So just be, you know, and so you know, a lot of young guys email me all the time and say just such amazing, really encouraging words, and say like, man, you know, I probably won't have an opportunity to actually do the craft you do, but just seeing you do it has given, you know, helped me, you know, as an individual, and that's super meaningful for me. Just, you know, we live in a culture that even, you know, the definition of what a man is kind of muddled, you know, and there's so many guys, you know, that come from young men that come from broken homes, and you know, their fathers aren't around, and they don't have older men, you know, wiser men to speak into their
Yep.
lives, and I don't take it for granted that I have amazing men in my life, you know, my father and grandfather and plenty other men who spoke into mine, but not all guys have that, and art can be one way that they can learn those truths, even if they don't have an older mentor, and so, you know, which, you know, it's kind of ironic that I'm using a symbol like a sword, which historically, you just have to be honest, swords were used for evil, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way around it. I mean, of course, the sword could be used for noble deeds, and that's the route I'm taking, hopefully, with it, is, I've talked a lot with my friend Dave Stevens about this, and then my fellow swordmaker friend Peter Lyons as well, who a ton.
Oh yeah.
But Peter Johnson in Sweden, amazing swordsmith. Talked a lot with them about how the sword is almost like an oxymoron, a contradiction. You know, it's beautiful, but it's deadly. It can stand for peace and protecting people, but it's also, you know, terrifyingly, it can be used for evil. And it's kind of a mirror into a human being's soul. And you know, when you're holding a sword, especially back in the day when they were used, and you know, it's a power object. It's like, what am I going to do with this thing? It brings people, it calls people forth about what do you believe about morality, you know? And so I'm you know, kind of unashamedly bold and honest about, you know, wanting to encourage and speak into young men's life about morality and right and wrong, and you know, those things aren't relative. We live in a very relativistic society that says, oh, you know, whatever floats your boat, you know, good is not, there's no such thing as good and evil, but it's like cultures crumble when they have that ideology, and I think the sword, when a sword's in your hand, you can't talk like that way. You have to come to terms with what is right and wrong, because I have the power to carry out both in my hand. So that's blabbering metaphysical mumbo jumbo philosophical nonsense, but trying to reel all that in. Yeah, I have a real heart to make Cedar Lore an encouragement, particularly for younger men, but for everybody, obviously, to just inspire people, whether they can, you know, own a sword of mine or not. Obviously, I'm thankful for all the men and women who you know, employ me and, you know, bless me with commissions and orders and opportunities to craft beautiful objects for them. But even if I can't, Cedar Lore Forge should be just as much for anybody else who appreciates the craft. And then practically speaking about like the name, I need to write more. I've plans of writing a long article and kind of explaining it in more detail why I picked the name. cedar trees throughout history, especially in ancient cultures, both in like the Hebrew, Jewish cultures, but even in Northern European, the cedar tree for some reason was always associated with strength and honor and pride, both of nature but also of men. The temple was built of cedar, the cedars of Lebanon that are talked about in Psalms and Proverbs. And King David, from what I know historically, his fortress, a lot of it was built out of cedar. Even archaeology talks about that and proves it. So what does that have to do with swords? Cedar trees representing, the symbol of strength and power and even pride. I love the proverb that talks about, the Lord, he can splinter the cedars, which means like everybody can be humble. It doesn't matter how strong or how powerful you are. It's like we're all the same. We're all in the same boat, in need of grace and in need of strength and love and forgiveness from each other. And the old proverb about the cedars of Lebanon, these strong symbols of power being splintered like they're little twigs, that played into me. I was originally even thinking of Splintered Cedar Forge, but associating the word splinter with objects you don't want to break probably shouldn't be done. So I settled with Cedar Lore Forge. Yeah, I mean, even I think in other cultures too, the symbol of the cedar tree doesn't also. It stands for power and strength and pride and all those things. It also stands just for purity and cleansing. So I've got a lot more thoughts about it that I want to explore and write about and stuff. But that's the surface level of what Cedar Lore Forge means. So
I love that there is so much thought into it, and so much, because it's not just a name, it's not just a company, that there's a purpose for it, and that, I definitely think, to get behind something like that, is worth it, worth investing in things like that. And, if I don't know, you go like, I'm shopping for a sword, where do I go? I would rather put my money behind something like that than, just some mega conglomerate, I don't know, like,
yeah.
Just like, here, have my money. But I mean, it's just, I think that's a great thing, especially like what you said, about inspiring the younger generations. And like you said, yes, the sword, it does have, it is almost like a black and white thing where opposite, it can mean strength for someone, and it can also mean domination in another way, so it's definitely, like you said, it's it can have that effect. And it's interesting to see, like, you put a sword in someone's hand, who are you going to be, especially as these young kids. I mean, I've got a 6-year-old son, and oh, I mean, since he could lift a sword, like play sword, I mean, that's just all he's been about, and he just loves fighting, being the good guy and going to fight the bad guy. And I mean, we were out back the other day running. I mean, I must have looked like such a geek. I was running, when we were fighting, we were camping out back, and he said, there's dragons over there, and so we're running all over, with fake swords. It's awesome. But just to I don't know, it just I think it can definitely inspire confidence, and there's so many good qualities about it, definitely. And so I can't wait to get, I mean, he knows that I go and take, training. I'm training with a German longsword. He wants to go as soon as he can get old enough. He's like, we're going to do this together, Mom. Like, I don't know if you'll be saying that then, but okay. Well, he's like, oh, Mom, drop me off around the corner.
Going to sword practice with my mom.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's cool.
Oh, man. Oh, that'd be terrible. I mean, I'm sure, he loves me, but I can totally understand. I'll be like, I need some space. It's a little weird, Mom. I just can't handle it. But yeah.
Well, I love what you say. It's so true about, you see that in little kids. Both boys and girls, of course, but especially that fire in little boys. The fire is both there equally. It's just very different, I think. The fire in little boys, it's a dangerous fire because it can be a harmful fire. I'm unashamed and unabashed about trying to help and encourage and open up conversation about what masculinity in this culture is, because you either see, I mean, I've with guys a lot, my age and younger, you see young men who are confused, and they're either dominating and abusive and evil and don't care about other people, or they're passive and they don't know how to stand up against wrong. You know, it's like,
It's
who's
true.
going to stand up against the people who are wronged and, injustice and stuff? So you need to have a man who stands in the middle and knows how to be tender like a lamb but strong like a lion.
Very
And
much
so
so, yeah.
that,
That's exactly, I mean, as a mom trying to teach him those type of things and trying to, say he's running around after his sister, chasing her, like, no, 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 no,
yeah,
wait, the good
yeah,
guy here
yeah,
would be, and I mean, my daughter's, she's, not like I was. I was so much of a tomboy. It was ridiculous when I was growing up, and I would be like my son, just like running and, fighting everything I
yeah.
could. My daughter is just like, I don't want to have a sword right now. I just want to go pick flowers, and it's like, and so he's like, if you don't come over here and play with me right now, then I'm gonna run after you and get you with this sword. And I'm like, no, hold up. Let's
That is
try this
not a
again.
gentlemanly, chivalrous route,
Yeah, definitely the brother versus sister route, but no,
Yeah.
let's be gentle. Let's, if good guys with swords, they're fighting the bad guys, protecting and all that stuff.
I'd be lying if I said my sisters didn't have to deal with that crap for me too. So,
It's so true.
every kid. So,
Very
but,
true. Well, it's a good thing, I love hearing about that type of stuff, and I'm so glad that you're continuing, that you didn't, things didn't end with, Mad Workshop, but that you're going along with Cedar Lore Forge, and I'm so excited to see where it's going to go. Like I said, I remember you guys were one of my first Q&As back in the day, and I say back in the day, and, to see where you guys have come and to see Cedar Lore Forge and to see the stuff you've made, it's just, I mean, I get blown away, like I said.
thank you.
I mean, wow. It's just fantastic. If I was, like, wealthy, I would be like, can you make me my own sword? It's just so cool. But let's talk a little bit about, just practicality type things. So say someone does want to order a sword, how would they go about that with Cedar Lore Forge?
Absolutely. At the moment, yeah. I love working with people one-on-one individually. I worked on a movie and I'm working on another small one, The Narrow Road. I'll talk about that later in detail. But really my bread and butter and the thing that I really love is working with individual people who have, a dream in mind that they've cooked up and developed, and they'll email me or call me and say, hey, would you be capable of this? And, a lot of times, unfortunately, I'm not capable of it. It's either not a style that I am interested in or it's beyond my capabilities. I have to be honest and humble about what I can do and not do. Yeah, I'm incredibly blessed with a good list of people who have invested some time and money in me and said, take as long as you need to craft me an heirloom that I can pass down to my family for generations, which is a huge honor. And with each person I work with, I love getting to know them personally and building a friendship. I don't like doing things coldly and at a distance. I want to get to know them if I'm going to make them an object that they're going to have for a lifetime. So yeah, basically, if people find my website, I've got a page on there called Order, just the order page, and you click that, and it goes into detail about how to contact me, the information that I need to know up front. Usually people, write up a description, maybe include some images or a sketch they've done of what they have in mind, and I'll get back with them and say yay or nay, and if I can, we work on the preliminary stuff, and I'll then do either a digital render or a penciled out sketch rendering for them, and it's I've got a waiting list. Swords.
Wow.
They take a time.
I believe it.
So and I'm definitely an artist with the mindset that if you're not going to do it right, don't do it at all.
Definitely.
And no shortcuts, especially in a craft like sword making. I mean, even though I'm, some people who don't have a vast knowledge of the craft and haven't done a lot of reading will assume, oh, well, if you're not smelting your own steel and forging it by hand and using, a foot-powered whetstone grind,
Oh my gosh.
You're not allowed to use electricity because if you use electricity, it's not a real sword. It's like, if you walk into my shop, yeah, I have modern tools. I have my forge. I have a charcoal coal forge, but the forge I primarily use runs off of propane. LP gas you use on a grill, but it's just as efficient and it works faster. My grinder, it's not. I have a foot-powered whetstone grinder, but the main one I use is a high-powered electric belt grinder. That's used in industrial settings.
Right.
But even though I'm using those modern tools, the pieces itself, the blades itself. I try to make, even if it's a fantasy piece too, still try to make it as functional and realistic as possible, rooted in history, so that if it was taken on a battlefield, it would act the way it's supposed to. So I have a waiting list. I work with people in order of when their order's placed. I usually work simultaneously on 3 or 4 projects at a time, and keep each customer updated, periodically about the status with photos, progress photos of how their project's coming along. And it's a joy. I mean, to update somebody and send them an email with the photo of the sword they've been dreaming about for years, and then to see it is a really rewarding, cool thing. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely. I know I've sketched my own sword. I'm like, oh, one day I shall have, like, wouldn't that be so cool? But, so yeah, I can imagine. And I'm sure you got, I mean, with just the quality of your work, I'm sure there's like backed up orders. Like, I'll be 80 by the time I get my sword. It's all how, it's like in order to afford it. But like, yeah. But I'd love to talk too about some of the process because, like I said, I watched this documentary Nova put out about the Viking sword, Secret of the Viking Sword, or whatever, and I think you talked about the fuller within the blade, and they were saying that helped to get the use the most of the steel or the iron or whatever. You could make it longer, but it's still, as strong, and it's not, it doesn't lose its strength in that. But I'd like to know, some of the blades that I've seen you do, they have these, I don't know how to explain it, shiny, it's like a pattern in the blade. Can you talk a little bit about that practice, like that? What is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple terms that are used loosely to describe that. Some people call that Damascus steel. In other ways, you can call it pattern welded steel. Some bladesmiths disagree about terminology, about what it should be called, but generally, anytime you see the folded layers, it's pattern welded. So historically, that is more or less what swords looked like, but they weren't. The pattern was an accident. Because today. If you go back in time and you think about it, a Viking smith couldn't just go to the store or get online and order a bar of freshly milled, pure, high-carbon tool steel.
Right.
He had to drag a magnet along the beach and hope to collect any iron ore, dust that he could scrounge up. And when he'd have enough ore, the basically just iron sand, he would put that in a big furnace. If anybody's watched this year's Arctic Fire, which I wasn't at, but my friends obviously were at, they did a smelt. They used one of these furnaces and they made their own steel. So it's a big, almost a chest height. They can be different sizes, but usually chest height, stone, brick, and clay forms just kind of chimney tunnel, filled to the brim with charcoal, and you pour the iron ore into that furnace as it's lit up and blazing hot. And what happens is the ore, melts, gets hot and goes to the bottom. Basically, all drips down to the bottom, purifies itself. Well, not totally pure. It solidifies in the bottom in what's called a bloom. So after, most smelts last about 4 or 5 hours, maybe a little bit longer. It depends on how big. And you have to destroy the furnace you crafted. Knock down the walls and get all the hot burning charcoal out of the way. And there's this big glowing boulder. It's not pretty. It looks rough. It's almost like it's like a sponge of slag and dirt and impurities and some iron and steel in there.
Official term, slag. I remember that in the documentary. Yeah, slag.
So, well, I love that word too, slag. But so once you have the bloom, it's still hot for a while. You then just work on purifying it. So, historically, you'd have a group of 5 or 6 guys probably, all with sledgehammers surrounding this thing on an anvil stump on the ground, and they'd just be pounding it.
Singing a song as they go.
Yeah. And it's like, the Hobbit movie wasn't totally inaccurate that came out recently. That scene where all the dwarves are going at it.
Yeah.
What they're doing. So
I love that one where they hold up the piece of iron, and these two massive things, boom, and it freaks me out every time.
That, not so sure about. But,
that's not historically accurate? What?
Dwarves, they're historical. Anyway, so So that's basically the process. You got the bloom. You break it down into smaller pieces, and it's just a long process of flattening out those pieces and restacking them, folding them, restacking them, folding them.
Okay.
And by folding and stacking, I mean when you get steel and iron to a certain temperature, it's so hot that if the steel is clean, it'll fuse to itself. I mean, just like you would take two different colors or types of clay, if you pound them together, they're going to stick. And when you fold, you're going to see those two colors swirling together. It's essentially what you're doing with the steel.
Okay.
So historically, the Viking smiths weren't, ooh, we want to make a pretty-looking blade. They were like, we just want a homogeneous bar without, boulders and bumps and flaws. It shouldn't break under battle, and the only way to get those impurities out is fold, fold, fold.
Right.
There's some debate whether they even etched the blades so that you may not even have been able to really see that pattern. Today, when I or another bladesmith does pattern welding, we're really just mimicking that old style, and we'll etch it in acid to bring out the pattern so it's clearly visible. But it really doesn't. I mean, the truth. People have to understand the truth. It doesn't, especially in a modern context. It doesn't add to the quality of the steel. It's basically just reflecting back on the older style of purifying it. It looks beautiful. It's a lot more work, because on certain swords, I will just get a single straight bar of fresh modern steel, and I'll forge it and grind it to shape, and it's just that single shiny color. Whereas with a pattern welded blade, it has that dimension and the flow and the ripples and the lines, which reflects the older blades. So that's the gist of it, basically.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, there was a lot I learned from that documentary. I mean, there was just, the whole process of getting the iron and everything. And actually, you said iron ore. Now, I'm wondering, because this is pretty cool, and especially when I was a kid. My grandmother lives in Pennsylvania, and she lives up in the mountains in kind of central Pennsylvania, and she's actually on a mountain. And in the back of her house, there's a creek in the woods, and along that creek, there's this huge, old, now starting to crumble down iron ore forge. I mean, this is like serious stuff, hundreds of years old, and I remember as a kid like going around and pretending I'd collect treasure, because you'd find these. It was like, it's a bluish kind of color. I guess it was like, I don't know. We've always called it iron ore, so now I'm like, maybe it's not iron ore. I don't know. But it's this, I don't even know how to explain it. It's not like clear glass looking. It's the opposite. It's more like grayish blue, and some of them can be pretty blue colors, like turquoise almost. And it's the stuff that they didn't want, that kind of came off on whatever they were making. But I mean, you go in, and I mean, it's so dangerous, but I did it anyways. Shh, don't tell. My mom was going to kill me. But I used to go under, it's kind of, the top had already crumbled down, but you could go in and, sort through like this whole, it's just the coolest thing.
You need to send me the address of this place so I can go and check it out.
I know. Well, yeah, I mean, you said iron ore, and I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, that's what I collected, and I wonder if that's, so now I need to go back and find out, because it is a really cool place, and I love archaeology, so like, that's probably what started it as a kid, finding that and being like, wow, in the backyard.
Very awesome. So, yeah, hopefully that description makes sense of the folding and stuff, because it can be confusing for a lot of people, but. Yeah, so it's cool as a modern swordsmith is from guys like Rick Furr in Door County, who's shown in that Nova documentary. He was actually the first person to show me how to forge weld and fold the steel back when I was a little dweeb in high school and was just learning.
That's awesome.
And so thanks to learning from talented men like him, I have the capabilities, and I have before on certain swords. I have approached it in a totally historically aspect where I don't use any modern steel or modern materials. I try to get all, self-found materials, iron ore from my local area, and make a blade 100% almost from dirt, essentially.
Wow.
The majority of the blades I make, yes, they are, from, steel I got from a company, and wood that I got, from another company, but still, they're apples and oranges. They're both high quality. There's just different routes to get there. So.
That's so cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Love it. Well, let's talk. You mentioned a little bit about the next film that you're working with. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. That's It's a pretty cool, exciting project. I've been working on it for a while now. If anybody's familiar with my work and has been tracking, they're probably thinking, "Man, David's been working on this Mirror Road thing for ages," and I have. But the truth is, so it's a project, a film based off of John Bunyan's book, The Pilgrim's Progress, which is an old classic book. Hard to read, very almost like Shakespearean in its writing, but it's a beautiful story if you appreciate things like that. And the script is written by a good friend of mine named Eric Yeager, who is the producer of the film. And we're not even officially in production yet. So far, it's been me, him, and a few other creative individuals just starting the foundation work for this movie. And it's hopefully, it's going to be a faithful adaptation of the book, with some changes to help it. Not considerable changes, but changes to make it understandable for a modern audience. And it's it's going to be epic. Hopefully, a very ancient adventure kind of tale. Fans of Tolkien, of course, hopefully will love it. When the movie does start rolling and production does officially begin, it'll most likely be filmed in Arizona, where Eric, the producer, is located.
Where in Arizona?
I don't even want to guess. Last time, I'm pretty sure Eric, the producer, lives near Tucson, the Tucson area, but I could be wrong about that.
My grandfather used to live right near Old Tucson, so I've been there. So it's a cool place.
Cool. So yeah, I'm excited about it. Before we really get to work and production officially begins, we're working on raising funding and getting different backers from film companies and investors and whatnot. And our first goal is actually Eric has worked on a novelization of the script. So it's a book based off of a script based off a book, if that makes sense. But it's going to be awesome. And I've been working on illustrations for that. I've done about almost 20 illustrations in a very old world style. I probably shouldn't give an exact release date yet. But very, very soon, in the next couple months or so, Eric is coming out to my shop soon, and we're going to film a Kickstarter campaign video. So if anybody's interested in getting their hands on this book and reading it and help, inevitably buying the book based off the script will help us get the movie made. Eric's working on a couple other film projects that he'll be developing and bringing to life before Narrow Road. But anybody who wants to see the movie made, definitely keep an eye on my Facebook page and check it out when the time comes. So.
Cool. Well, that actually brings us to a point because I'd like to direct people, where they can find all your stuff, where they can find Cedar Lore Forge and all that. So.
My main website is cedarloreforge.com. So cedar like the tree and then LORE.com or forge.com, and you can find me on Facebook as well, just searching Cedar Lore Forge. And the Narrow Road film page can be found linked through my website or on my Facebook page as well. And if you want to just search Google for it, search Narrow Road film. It should be one of the top results. But yeah, I'm really excited to share a lot of the custom projects that I've been working on, and then share more about the Narrow Road in the next coming months. So.
Definitely cool. So. Awesome. Well, before we go, because we are almost, I can't believe already out of time. That went by like super fast. I wanted to ask, where you hope to see Cedar Lore Forge in, say, 10 years? Where do you want it to go in the future?
That's a great question. I really appreciate it. Don't totally know. That's all in the good Lord's hands. But, I have hopes and dreams and goals for where I will see it evolve and take place into. I've spoken a lot about how I want to encourage and empower younger men, young boys and stuff to either get in the craft or just however my work inspires them. But also practically speaking, I would love in the distant future to teach. I get a lot of people almost every week emailing me asking me, hey, do you take apprentices or do you teach classes? And I just honestly will not be able to in any way, shape, or form for the next 5 years or so. But in the distant future, I really would love to teach the craft, and that's a long-term dream of mine. While making swords is my main bread and butter job, I also love doing illustration and whatnot, and I always have future hopes and goals to do more paintings and drawings and illustrations, many of which I'll probably put for sale on my website or up for auction, 4 different books, magazines, and whatnot, depending on what I get commissioned on. I've also mentioned it before in a past interview with my friends over at the Middle Earth Network that I have another long-term dream of making a graphic novel, which I've kind of already begun work on, very roughly. But if people want to see that come to life, just get in touch with Cedar Lore. Help me spread the word. I'm just so overwhelmed and thankful by all the people who enjoy my work currently and have continued to support me. So that's what it looks like in the future. A lot more art and hopefully some teaching as well.
Wow. Thank you so much, David, for coming. So good to have you.
So good to talk to you.
Definitely. I know, I was telling him beforehand, there were so many questions. There's been other times where, he's been interviewed and everything, and I've been sitting in the back and so it's great because it's just so great to see what you've been doing and see where things, are and where they're going to go. That's just exciting. And like you said, you don't really know, anything could happen. I mean, time, so much can happen in just 1 year, but it's still exciting to, to see, what you want and the goals that you have. It's really exciting. So I appreciate it. And thank you for all of those who tuned into the show, Sword Talks, every Saturday at 5 p.m. EST, right on Reclaiming the Blade's YouTube channel. Don't forget that Reclaiming the Blade it was a movie done by Galatia Films, who are amazing. And they are currently in the works of trying to get a second film done, which would be called Sons of Fire. You have to do it really cool, which I can't, obviously. But they're in the works of trying to get that funded, and this is completely funded by people like you who love swords and who want to see it done. And I mean, the first film was just fantastic and so well done and so well put together, and so they really want to be true to that. And I mean, people they're like, you're interested in swords? Go watch this film. So I mean, it's it's definitely one of those films that's just kind of I don't know, it's exciting to see all the just this fire and this I feel like a lot of the whole sword world, if you will, is just really igniting and catching fire, and just there's lots of people getting excited about it. I had no idea, and then I come into this, I'm like, wow. So it's just great to see. So if you're really interested in that, check out reclaimingtheblade.com. Help out. Any little bit helps, even if you can't afford to give some, tweeting about it, putting it on your Facebook, spreading the word socially, all that helps. So again, thanks for tuning in, and next week there'll be another show come 5 p.m. EST. So thanks, guys. Have a good day. Bye, David.
See ya. Thanks so much.